Hey everybody, Crystal Clear Mystic here. So I want to talk today about spiritual awakenings. Okay, I had my spiritual awakening about a year ago, almost exactly a year ago at this point, and it's so funny because in my guided sessions that I do with clients, I've had a couple of people I shared this with, and they're like, thank you so much for being real and authentic about your experience. Because the reality is that spiritual awakenings are beautiful and yet terrifying. And it's interesting because when I had my spiritual awakening, I had a psychic awakening at the same time. So I didn't actually realize that these are two different things. There's like a spiritual awakening, which is like the realization of your purpose or that you're on the wrong path or that you're meant for bigger, right? And then psychic awakenings are kind of defined as like you are able to hear spirit, see spirit, be in contact with spirit, right? And those kind of like spiritual experiences are happening for you. And so mine kind of happened at the exact same time. And it's funny because my background is a therapist, and I've been a therapist for years, and I've been in my own private practice, marriage and family therapy specifically. So I see individuals and couples, and I did trauma work for a long time, and I still do that on the side here and there. But when this happened to me, like when I experienced my spiritual awakening, my psychic awakening, I thought I was having a manic episode. And by definition of what that is what I experienced. That is exactly what it was by symptomology and definition. And when I was seeing a therapist at the time, I was going through some like family stuff and things like that and relationship stuff. The therapist also thought the same thing. They thought I was having a manic episode or a psychotic break. It was one of the two. That she was pretty serious that I was. She advised me to get hospitalization and go on medication and all of these different things. And this isn't to say that you shouldn't do these things or you should do these things. But this is to say that my experience was something that I couldn't explain and was really difficult to understand because of my background, my history, the knowledge and information that I had received through schooling. And also being a very science-based mind, I've always believed in science. I always believed in like the medical models and all those kinds of things. So when this happened, it was really hard for me to really understand what was going on. It was absolutely terrifying. I was so afraid, and I thought I was losing my mind. I was really afraid. I wanted to put my dog like somewhere because I felt like I needed to go into the hospital. Like it was very scary for me. And the reality is that it was real. It happened. It was something that I needed to come to terms with and accept. And it was so scary. I, really had a hard time. I was like, I'm losing my fucking mind. I'm going crazy, like all these different things. And it's interesting because it's been a year now. So it's a lot easier for me to talk about this without getting like as overwhelmed or feeling shame or anything. And it never went away. So it wasn't a manic episode, because manic episodes are something that come and go. It never went away. And it was not as intense as it was in the beginning stages, but yet I still experience those things pretty regularly at this point in time. But now I understand them as me being connected to spirit and me understanding spirit and those different pieces. And so I guess all of this to say that like, I think spiritual awakenings are beautiful. I think they're wonderful, but you're also terrifying and scary. Everything that you thought was real and was true is ripped away from you. And you are left with a barren desert area, is like what I'm seeing in my mind's eye as I'm talking about this, because that's like what it felt like. It was like everything that I thought was supposed to be and I thought was the way things were actually was like not really true. And it made me question everything about my belief in science. It made me question everything that I believed about, who I am and where we come from and what happens after we pass away. And like all these, it just really really rocked my world. Let's put it that way. And so all of this to say that like they're beautiful and wonderful and it's this beautiful thing, but it's also absolutely terrifying. And the other piece of this too is like, you know, you have the spiritual awakening or psychic awakening, whatever happens for you, sometimes both. And then you are now aware of all these things. And then what the hell are you supposed to do with that? Right? Like it's so confusing. And like you feel like because of society and the way that society is built, right, that we're supposed to do something about it right now. We're supposed to figure it out right now. Like what's next? Where do we go? What do we do next? Right? And I think that was like the hardest part, was learning that there is nothing that needs to be done with it at this exact moment, right? And then usually you fall right into a kind of dark night of the soul experience, is a lot of the times what they call it. And so shadow work, right? And it's interesting because a year later, I'm kind of on the other side of that in a lot of ways. Now, I'm not saying that you completely get rid of your shadow and your shadow doesn't exist. You learn how to live with it and you learn how to hold hands with it and you learn how to move with it, right? And I'm not saying that I've done all my healing work, because we all out here healing, okay? And we all out here winging it. It's something I say to my clients all the time. We all out here winging it and doing the best that we can with what we know. And every day I just try to be better and do better and be better for me. And that's really all that we can do. But the dark night of the soul kind of like comes up, right? And then we have to like do the work to figure that out and get through that and come out the other side of that. And I'm kind of on the other side of a lot of that work at this point in time. And so I think that's the other reason why it's so easy for me to like talk about this, and it doesn't feel like overwhelming or overly like emotional or a lot of sadness around it, because I've like learned to accept it as a part of my journey and learned to accept it as a part of like what happened and a part of like who I am now. It's interesting though, because, you know, I talk to people and so many people get stuck in that phase where it's kind of like the shadow work, the dark night of the soul, and they get lost in there and they like really don't know how to get out. And because of my background, I already had a pretty big understanding about how the mind and the body works. I did a lot of somatic work associated with therapy when I was doing therapy mostly. And so, you know, I had a pretty good background and understanding of like what it means to shift thoughts, shift beliefs, and kind of like choose different ways of behaving so that you can feel better, and also regulate the nervous system, because that's a big part of like this process of healing. And I guess there's like this research out there where it talks about people who awaken later in their lives. And so I'm one of them. And when you awaken later in your life, there are only so many people that awaken and then keep ascending and keep moving through the awakenings to kind of come out the other side and really come back to who they truly authentically are, and to find that genuine happiness in that space, right? So we're talking about balancing masculine and feminine energy to come back to who you authentically are, to find purpose in your life and love for your life in the present moment right now. And, you know, research says that this happens to many people later in life, but many people don't make it all the way through. And they don't keep going, at least. They fall off at some point. And it's funny because I've definitely noticed that with some of my clients who have awakened, where, you know, the beliefs or the fears come back into place, the chakras get blocked again after the awakening, and then there's like this unsureness of how to shift those things or move those things in a different way. And I think, you know, it's about learning how to feel the feelings that come up. It's about learning how to face those feelings that come up. And it's about learning how to do the thing anyways, even though we understand why we're struggling or where the fear or shame is coming from. And I think that's like the hardest thing, because that paralyzes us, that freezes us in space, right? But the more that you practice and do those things and follow through, even though you're feeling the fear, even though you're feeling the nervousness, the more you come back to yourself and the more you're able to move forward. So I kind of hope that makes sense. But I kind of want to share this because I think that it's important to like understand spiritual awakening from other people's perspectives, especially when you are still really new to spirit, like being really awoken in the spiritual awakening. It can be so confusing. It can be so lonely and isolating, right? They talk about the hermit kind of journey that happens too. And I think that, you feel really alone in this thing. And it's hard because there's like, I see a lot of people who get caught in this like spiritual psychosis and struggle to stay grounded, or they get too grounded and they lose their spiritual connection. And really what I've learned how to do is kind of be able to balance both of them. So be grounded and practical in the reality of what is, or at least what we have to live in, right? But also be spiritually connected and still tapped into my intuitive nature and who I am. And that can be really hard. And I think in the beginning, I was definitely in the psychosis place. I mean, I think I was calling people, like when I would talk to people that I was like friends with or whatever, I referred to people as humans, right? Like I was different than them, right? There is this like separation that you experience in the beginning. And it is like very much like this psychosis kind of space where it is really hard to understand what's going on. It's really hard to ground back down into reality and still hold this space. I'm not going to deny that. And, one thing that's coming to mind as I'm saying this is that sometimes people, you'll hear them say, well, I'm a God, but I don't know what you are, right? We're all divine beings of light. But in your awakening, when you first awaken, you are very much focused on that, your personal experience, because you only know what you're personally experiencing and you don't know what anybody else is. And of the fact of what you do know of what other people is, it's not the same as you, and you feel so distant from them, right? And so there's like a healing and an integration of shadow that needs to occur for you to kind of balance that out and come into this unity consciousness place. So, I think it's so interesting when people are like, well, maybe you need to like check yourself. Maybe you need to like do the work or whatever, right? Like one of the things I've had to learn on this journey is that everybody's exactly where they're supposed to be. And just because I'm in this place and someone else is over here doesn't mean that mine is any better. My journey or path is any better. It's all valuable, and we're all in the places that we need to be exactly right now. And when we're ready to move, we'll move, right? But it's not our job to judge other people, and it's not our job to tell other people what they should or shouldn't do, or that they have shadow or not. That's all of our individual journey to decide how we want to do with that and what we want to do with that, and if we want to work with that, right? Or not. I'm sure you've probably heard of people who have awakened and they just don't do anything with it, right? Like, so everybody gets a choice and it's free will. Welcome to free will in this world that we live in, right? So, spiritual awakenings are these beautiful things, and they're also terrifying. And it's so normal to go back to what you know because you've known it and lived it for so long that like taking this new step is just so out of reach, it feels, or so scary. And it is scary. I'm not going to deny that it's not scary. It's freaking terrifying sometimes. And though it's so worth it. And, but everybody's got to decide that for themselves. Everybody's got to figure that out and move through that all on their own. And there's nothing that one person can say or do to make you change your way. That's not your job. Your job here is to be true to who you are and authentic to who you are, and keep on keeping on. And the right people will watch you and be inspired. And there will be people that hate you. And that has nothing to do with you either, right? So, it's so interesting when we talk about awakenings, because I think everybody also experiences them so differently. Like, did you have a psychic awakening? Did you have a spiritual awakening? Did you have both? Did they happen at different times, right? For some of the psychics I know, it seems like they happen similarly at the same time. It's been interesting because one of the commonalities that I've heard too is that like someone in their family that they were very, very close and connected to passes away. And then they'll have a spiritual and psychic awakening within the first, I want to say 3 to 5 years, sometimes earlier than that, 2 to 5 years after the passing. And that's like when everything kind of like moves forward and escalates for them, which is very interesting. But, Awakenings are a beautiful thing, but we need support and help and understanding on how to get through them sometimes. And sometimes we just don't have all the answers to how to figure things out, right? And that's totally okay. I also just want to recognize that it's not something that's really spoken about in society. It's not something that's really understood in society. And so there is a lot of judgment that comes with it. You kind of get tossed in the crazy basket. And that doesn't mean that your reality and your experience isn't real or true for you. And so I hope that, sharing my experience of what happened and how I was seen and kind of what I had to overcome within myself and recognize within myself, even though I'm sure my therapist still probably thinks I had a manic episode or a psychotic break because I stopped seeing her after that, because she told me I needed a higher level of care, right? Like, I hope that sharing that with you can help you to recognize that these things aren't completely understood by other people. There are definitely therapists out there that have spiritual understandings and they do get this kind of thing and they are able to tap into that with you. I'm not saying that they don't exist, but it's not well known enough, well understood enough, or well believed enough, I think, for everybody to have an experience that feels safe and comfortable and good. It actually is very vulnerable and scary in the beginning. And there is a lot of worry about who do you trust and can I trust this person? I can't trust anybody. And so complete hermit mode, must protect myself, right? And this difficulty with going back out and integrating with people. And it's a balancing act. It's a constant balancing act. That is what I'm going to say about it. So, if you had a spiritual awakening and it was not the greatest in regards to the way that it happened, I want you to know that your truth is your truth and other people don't need to understand that for it to be true for you. Other people don't need to get your experience for it to be true for you. Other people don't have to know what's going on with you for you to have a value in your story and your truth. You're not here for other people to understand you. You're here for you to understand you. Understanding comes from within yourself. I hope this is helpful for somebody who needed to hear that, because I wish that when all of this happened, I had somebody who could have told me something similar to that, because I really did think I was losing my mind, and that was really scary for a while. And then I had to come around to accepting that this isn't going away. It hasn't gone away. So it's time to accept it for what it is and learn how to live with it and move forward with it. Love and light.